All right, welcome to the Rise community. Today we have such one of my favorite people. She's been my prayer partner. She has supported me and I've supported her. We've known each other for years and years and years. We've been ministered in the same town together. She's now in Denver, Colorado. She is the co-lead minister at Mile High Church in Denver. She's a spiritual presence. She is just light personified. I love this woman. It is so exciting to me that she is a part of our conversation today. So, Reverend Dr. Michelle, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here with you. It's just like having coffee again in the old days.
It is just like having coffee again, only we're going to have other people a part of this conversation.
That's right. Other
That's it.
witnesses.
Okay, so let's start with you because it really is always about you, right?
Okay. All right.
Okay, so talk to us about how you became into this spiritual mindset. Talk to me about how you came into being the amazing woman that you are.
Wow. Well, I think I've always been a spiritual seeker, like many of us, always been very curious about life and the universe. And when I was a child, our family, my father, we're part Hispanic. He really resonated with the Catholic Church. And so we went to Catholic church on a regular basis. And I loved all the pomp and circumstance of church. And I had a great Sunday school or catechism teacher, and just really resonated with me. But then some things started happening there that just didn't work for me. I joke about it was like 3 strikes and I was out. And the third strike happened when I was 13 and I was asking too many questions in catechism. And my catechism teacher said, if you can't believe everything I'm saying right now, you need to leave. And so I left. And then for 2 years, I had a very young, my mother's only 17 years older than me, very open-minded. So between the age of 13 and 15, we started reading books, just any book we could find. And we found this really amazing spiritual book that talked about God and about the universe and about the Jesus words that all you need to do is knock and the door shall be opened unto you. And I remember going to her and saying, Mom, is there a church where they believe this stuff? And she said, no. And if it is, it's all the fringe people. And we don't want to be fringe people. Hello, my fringe people. How are you today? Anyway, finally, after a few years, she was a real estate agent here in Denver. And this friend of hers who who knew the books we were reading said, I think you two might like that Mile High Church place. So we ventured in here when I was 15 years old, very nervously. We didn't know what happened. If you've never seen the buildings here, they're constructed in a very strange and unusual architecture. If you watch the movie Sleeper, Woody Allen used our original building here as his McDonald's in the movie Sleeper. And so it's kind of an arch. So we came into these buildings, and the minute that the minister started speaking, Dr. Fred Vogt, and the music started playing, I had that feeling like, this is my spiritual home. This is where I need to be. And so I joined the teen group. I was involved. I got in the choir. I just volunteered all that I could, and I just ate it up. And then I finally took some classes after I graduated from high school, that semester between high school and college. And in that period of time, some strange voice just out of the blue said to me, you should be a minister. And I thought that was the dumbest idea I'd ever heard, and resisted until I could resist no more. And fell into this teaching in a very powerful way, went to ministerial school here in Denver and graduated when I was 27 years old. I was a very young minister and looked very young, and went out in the world to do my best to spread these teachings. And the moment it really shifted for me was a very kind of come to Jesus on my knees praying moment, where that inner voice said to me, your life purpose is the teaching and practicing and articulation of these teachings for yourself and others. This is what you came here to do. Now get about doing it. And there was no turning back at that point. So does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah, I just get so inspired by listening to you. I mean, I do. I get so excited about listening to you. So you had this experience, and then you went to ministerial school, and then give us a little bit more about your journey.
When I graduated from the school, I had been working on the staff here at Mile High Church. I was a staff member, and I was the administrative assistant to the ministers and the event coordinator. And Dr. Roger Teal had left Mile High, he'd been here for many years, and he'd gone to the Huntington Beach Church, and he wanted an assistant minister. And I was young, and we were familiar with each other, had worked together. So he invited me to come and serve there. And so I went and served as an assistant minister for 4 years in Huntington Beach. He came back here after I got there. He came back here within 2 years. And so I worked with the great Mary Marie Shelton. And then I knew it was time for me to find a church that I could serve as a lead minister. And so I candidated, which is basically interviewing at different churches, until I found the one in Arizona, the New Vision Center, that I just fell in love with the people and just knew that weekend I went to go visit. This is my church. And that was in 1995. I'd been a minister for 4 years at that point, and I served in that church for 17 years. And we went from a small community meeting in a cultural center and just grew and grew and grew until when I left, we'd purchased our own building, not too far from your former church, Unity of Phoenix. And we'd grown tremendously and survived through the 2008 challenges where, we saw so many miracles. We were renting a space in Scottsdale that was very pricey. And one of the most amazing things that ever happened is during this time when everyone said, you'll never get a loan, you'll never be able to buy a building, we managed to buy a building, and we reduced our costs, and we moved into our church. And it was a very satisfying 17 years. And I felt very fortunate and happy. I had great colleagues like Richard there that I could always call on and connect with. And I had a great community. And then I came to visit here in Denver at one point, and Roger Teal was back here serving as their senior minister for 25 years. And he invited me out for a meal and said he wanted to talk to me about something. And I had no clue what it was about. And he offered me a job. And this was another moment where my head was saying, why the heck would I do that? I'm really happy in Arizona. I'm really happy in my church. But that internal voice that was similar to the voice that called me to ministry in the first place was saying, I think this is our next step. And I was like, no, I don't want to do this. But my inner guidance kept saying, nope, this is your next step. And when I came back here, I said yes. I left my community there, which was really hard. And I came back here. I had no promises from Roger that eventually I would be in charge or be, the senior minister. And I had no clue when he was going to retire. And I just came here on trust, and things unfolded. And then became the co-lead minister with a gentleman that I knew back in Huntington Beach. So it all kind of connects. So such synchronicity,
I just think it's amazing how God uses everything in a
Yes.
way that we can't always understand when we're going through it. But
Mhm.
years later, we see all the connection points.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like one of the greatest blessings of my life is when it comes to this work that I get to do in the world. I feel exceedingly guided. I feel like my inner voice truly calls me to what's next for me, to how I need to move forward. And I really work hard to then allow that guidance to have its way with me in other areas of my life, because I think that we all have that capacity. And that if we pay attention, then we hear that calling to whatever is next for us, whatever is right for us, whatever is the next step in any realm of our living. And I think that's a pretty powerful way to live. That's how I want to live.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's talk about your book, can we?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so what's the name of your book?
My book is called Resolve Your Fears, Activate Your Spiritual Immune System.
All right, so let's talk about that. So
Yeah.
what did you want to express in your book?
Well, it was interesting. I knew I wanted to write a book. And so I got invited to a writer's workshop. And the goal of the workshop that they said we would have a book at the end of the week that was the first draft of a book that a reader could read in 3 hours or less. That was the goal, to just get your first book out there. And they were going to teach us how to do that. And then they made us do this closed eye process. And the question we were all asked in the workshop is, if you could solve any problem on the planet, any issue on the planet, what would it be? And I got really clear, it would be fear. That what if humans could be less afraid or not afraid anymore to live their life full out, to do what they want to do, to take the risks they want to take, to go where they want to go. And that there's so much in the world that I think is always trying to convince us to be afraid. Be afraid, be very afraid. The weather is fearful. The people over there you should be afraid of. And the people in the other faith you should be afraid of. And the people in the other political party should be afraid of. And it just feels like a lot of what we're facing all over in so many realms of this planet is the management of fear. And so I decided to write a book. And then I came across the metaphor for myself in the process of the immune system. That's where the activate your spiritual immune system came from. And I recognized that our physical immune system works very well for us. If we feed it, if we help ourselves stay stress-free and healthy and court wellness, our immune system, we can have cancer cells float through our body and our immune system will take care of them just like that. And that it's a powerful, powerful system. And it dawned on me that when it comes to fear, we could also have a spiritual immune system where we could learn to manage our fears, to bust our fears up, to get rid of them, to release them, to surrender them, so that we can live more fearlessly. And that the challenge is that we often get what I call the fear flu, because we just don't keep managing it. We just keep allowing ourselves to fall victim to it in our minds and keep ourselves living from fear. And then that creates more stress. So our spiritual immune system needs the same attention as our physical immune system.
That's great. Okay, so how do we do that?
So I talk in my book, and I believe that part of how we do that is, first of all, we have to acknowledge and be willing to look directly at what it is that we're afraid of. And a lot of times I feel like people don't want to claim they're afraid. It's almost like this fear we have from a parent or something, like, don't be afraid, just do it. And so sometimes in our life, we just don't even want to admit, yeah, I'm afraid. I feel fear in this area. So the first step that I think is really important is just to acknowledge that we may have these places that aren't working so well in our life. At the core of them might be some fear. Like I'm doing a series right now on abundance here at Mile High Church. And I feel like a lot of times people are not financially abundant because they're afraid of money. They're afraid to have more money. They're afraid of the responsibility that comes with having more money. They're afraid if they had more money, people will ask them for it, or they'll be called to do more. And so they want to play small, and it's a fear. It's kind of a subtle fear. So sometimes it's the willingness just to look at and say, I think I've got some fear running me there. And so the acknowledgement of it is the first step. And then after that comes the willingness to let it go. Am I willing to surrender this fear? Am I willing to let it go? And if I'm willing to let it go, what needs to be in place of it? What does courage look like in this realm of my life? And for every one of us, that's different. Courage might be about going to therapy and healing my relationship with a parent that taught me things about something, or it might mean getting a spiritual counselor. It might mean going to a church. It might mean taking a class. It might mean doing what we fear anyway and doing it afraid. That wonderful book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. So there's a whole bunch of things that I think we can do to help ourselves push through and move beyond our fears, but we've got to wake up to it and be conscious of it first.
One of the things I just love about that is that sometimes we're afraid to be afraid,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
We're just afraid to be afraid. And
Yes.
as we feel more and more empowered, it becomes okay to be afraid, because we realize it's not going to stop us from anything.
Exactly. Yeah. And one of the things I think I say a couple times in the book is we have to acknowledge that every person we've ever met no matter how successful they are, they've had fear at some point. Fear to step forward, fear to take risks, fear to get married, fear to get divorced, fear to have children, fear to take that job, fear to move. Everybody's got fear. It's not like you're unique and special around that. And
Right.
so just admitting it, that everybody has their fears. These are my fears. I see them. I'm going to work with them, is just really an empowering state. You're absolutely right, Richard. Absolutely.
Well, and one of the things, what we've talked about is the more that you want to create, or you have an intention in your life, it automatically brings up a level of fear.
It does. Yes. Yeah, because I think that um, our identity gets very caught up in our current reality. And it's almost like our ego goes, oh my gosh, you're wanting to change who we are by changing where you live. Are you kidding? But we've always lived here. We've always done that. Or this is how things have always been. And that sense of our identity can cause a lot of stress for us. And so sometimes I know that I work with my parts, my inner parts, which I have a fearful part, and say to it, sometimes I'll just talk with it and say, oh my gosh, you've been doing such a good job protecting me. You've kept me from this horrible situation, and I really appreciate it. And now I need your help because I need to be more courageous, and I need support to move forward in this. And we're going to do this together, almost like talking to a child. Like if you have a little kid you love that you're trying to convince to go on the roller coaster for the first time, I'm going to be with you and we're going to do this together. And, I'll be right there holding your hand. And it challenges our entire sense of self sometimes to move past our fears into things that are brand new. Absolutely.
So let's talk about the role that forgiveness has in that process.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny you should mention that, because I'm really looking into forgiveness for this week's message around abundance. And I think forgiveness is a huge part of forgiving people who taught us to be afraid. Because I tell the story in the book about, so my mother, when she was a little child, she had an older brother who was 6 years older than her, and he liked to tease her, and he liked to shock her, and they lived in the mountains. And one time she was in a car and he threw a fake snake from outside into the car on top of her, and it scared the heck out of her, and she thought it was real, and her whole system just fired up. And from that point on, even though it took her a while and she finally figured out it wasn't real, she has, and still to this day, has this phobia of snakes. And she will tell the story all the time about how her brother Eric did this to her. And you just mention the word snake to her and she can get so scared. And she's tried a little to get on with it and heal it. And she's made some progress. But the point is that when I was really young, she told the story so much that I started to have this fear of snakes. Also, I started to feel this almost phobia about snakes. And as I grew older and felt my heart kind of opening to everything in the universe, even little bugs and bees and birds and doggies and cats and stuff, I finally said to myself, why am I really afraid of snakes? And I realized that at the core of me, I'm really snake neutral, but my mother had given me this fear. And so I had to forgive my mother for her passing this phobia on to me. And it was a way of freeing myself. She still has the fear. She still talks about it. But by being willing to forgive her, I freed myself from that energy. Now that's just a silly almost example, but it is appropriate in that we've all through osmosis absorbed the fears often of the people we were closest to in those first years of our life. So if they were afraid of violence, or they had some traumatic experience, or they were afraid of money, or there was some fear of survival, or afraid that someone would leave, or afraid of betrayal, we can almost kind of absorb it. And so forgiveness, being able to look right at that squarely also and say, I got this fear from my father, or I got this fear from my grandmother. I know it. She had it. I'm going to forgive her for that. It frees me to be able to move forward and bring all the parts of myself that have been in an old timeline back to the now moment, which is where I'm most powerful. So forgiving other people is often very much a part of freeing ourselves from fear, and forgiving ourselves too, of course, for possibly being frozen. I know that when I get really afraid, I freeze. I just freeze. It could be in a conversation. If it's conflict, it can be in a moment where I don't know what's going on. I had a bit of a traumatic childhood, and I know that came from my father, because my father was volatile. And when he would start to go off, I would just freeze. I remember thinking, just don't move. And it was a habit that I would have in life, and it wasn't supporting me in any of my relationships. If I got into conflict with somebody in our church, or I felt unsafe in any way, I would just freeze, and I couldn't be the most powerful version of myself. In that moment, I couldn't speak my truth, and so I had to work for a lot of time and conscious presence to really forgive my father for scaring me like that, to understand that he did the best he could. He couldn't help himself. He was very young and immature, and he learned from his father. It was kind of a legacy, and I was able to let him go. And now I just don't freeze near as much. Now I can stay really present. So forgiveness is a very key part, I think, of surrendering our fears and letting them go.
Well, as I have, watched your life unfold, your life has just gotten progressively larger in over and over again. Like every
Mhm.
time, like you just keep taking another step. It seems to me like fear is kind of the opposite of that activity. How have you managed, as the universe, as spirit, as God has called you into a bigger life? How have you managed your own fear and not stopping that process?
I think it's because I have felt that presence with me as I let go of a lot of the stuff that happened in my life, in my early life, as I forgave, as I surrendered, as I came more into myself and returned myself to myself, did my inner work, personal inner growth, and continued to rely on God and rely on that guidance, then it just it pushes me forward. And I feel that sense of, if I get stressed or I think, oh gosh, can I handle this? Am I worthy of this? I just continue to feel that invitation just pushing me forward, and I just go with it. And in some cases, as I said, I don't feel an intense fear in this realm, really. I just feel kind of like sometimes a little anxiety, like, is this the right thing to do? And then I'll get some indication, usually an inner indication, this is exactly what we're supposed to do. I remember standing to come and speak here at Mile High Church for the first time, and standing back in the backstage area, and I was about to go into this big environment and speak, and I could feel a little bit of nervousness. And I realized I only get nervous when I want to impress somebody, when I want to do good. And I wanted to do good for Roger. I wanted Roger to be proud. And I thought, I got to let that go. And as soon as I let that go, that inner voice said, this is who we are. This is what we do. Just go do it. And the fear went away, and I just went out there and did my thing. And so it's just a constant willingness to let God win. I think the God in me win out over and over and over again. And the more I do it, the more I can feel that in any situation, any condition. And I have been guided in many other ways, and been so grateful for the path that my life has taken, for sure.
That's great. One of the things that you and I have done for each other has been there to support each other.
Yes.
And the Rise community that we've created is really about, how do we support each other in living our best life and being the best version of ourselves. So
Mhm.
talk to me about what support means to you, in both in overcoming fear, but just in living the day-to-day of life.
I really think that communities like this are vital for everyone. I know some people are more introverted. I have a son who's really introverted, and he thinks he doesn't need a lot of support or people around him. And yet I can see that he gets a lot of he gets a lot of juice and energy when he's open to it from his friends and other people, and encouragement. And so I know that I am the kind of person, I always have been the kind of person that I know I thrive best with friends and people that I can talk to. So even during the pandemic, when we were all supposed to stay home, I was making efforts to create community for myself and having Zoom sessions with people and having cocktails with people on Zoom and talking to people on the phone, and being sure that I had places where I could support and be supported, because I think that humans are at our best when we are allowing ourselves to hear new ideas, even ideas that initially we disagree with or we don't resonate with, but it allows us to have deeper thoughts, to contemplate, and to even be inspired by something that is least expected, that causes us to go, oh my gosh, I really need to make a big change here, or I'm ready to take that next step. And it's in that connection with other people. Like I felt that when you and I were meeting together, it was just such a joy, as it is today, just to be in your presence, Richard, and just to feel whatever was going on in our personal lives or in our ministry, that we could just be honest with each other, that we could trust each other, that it was a confidential setting, that I wasn't going out and finding your members and saying, did you know that Richard Rogers, that we were really, yeah, don't tell anybody, but, but we really, that bondedness empowered us like nothing else. I know empowered me as a minister, as a person, as a spiritual being, and just to be inspired by each other's presence. We need that. We really all need that.
That's great. All right. Anybody have a question for Reverend Dr. Michelle?
Yeah.
We're just going to open this up because I want to get your questions in here. I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to ask if they have a question. So I want to talk about one of the things you talk about in your book is being awake. And,
Yes.
and what does that mean to you in the management of fear and just in living your life?
Well, I try to practice mindfulness every day. I'm getting better and better at it, not only in my spiritual practice, but in my daily moving around the world, just being awake and noticing things and noticing people and really seeing what's going on around me. I think sometimes we can get so caught up in our own the stuff that we are wandering through our world, just thinking about everything and not really awake to what's around us, who's around us, and we lose touch with the things and the people that are most important to us. So I think being awake is a function of getting out of our own way, a function of really paying attention. My husband calls it situational awareness, which I like that term. That's not in my book, but he talks about it all the time, that people who just don't even notice that person that they've just pushed their cart into while they're in the store, or don't even notice as they're backing out that there's another car there, or don't even notice that mother who's struggling to get her kids into the car and put the groceries away, and don't even notice these opportunities that are right there before us, where God is guiding us to support and help each other in a moment where we could just make a connection and say, I see you. Do you need any support right now? And so being awake serves me and helps me serve other people.
That's fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So when you talk about your immune system, is there anything else that we can do to really build up our immune system against fear?
Well, it's funny you should mention that. I opened the book a little while ago, and I have just a teeny little part in here about inoculating ourselves. And I talk about how I know inoculations are, and vaccinations are a touchy topic. And I'm not talking, I have no stand that I want to take around whether people should be vaccinated or not. And yet I understand the concept of inoculating ourselves is to build immunity for those moments when fear comes about. And so I talk about, and I think that the way that I see we should inoculate ourselves, there's a number of ways, but it's take on little fears at first. Take on little fears and conquer them. Little fears like, the fears of snakes, or the fear of spiders, or the fear of something else, and find some methodologies that you can use to take down the level of those fears, just little by little by little, easy little fears that plague us about violence. And what would it mean today if I trusted in my life? What would it mean today if I listened to my guidance? And I talk about, like, every time I get on a plane, I listen and say to myself, is there any reason I shouldn't get on this plane? And I promise myself that if I ever hear that voice that says you shouldn't get on this plane, I will honor it. And I will honor those moments, because fear has its purpose. Fear can be that voice of guidance, but to learn to distinguish between that guidance voice and that fear voice is really important. And so if we do this in little ways and we build up our immunity to fear, and then doing things that we are afraid to do. And I was a little afraid to go diving in the ocean. So I went diving in the ocean so that I could get past that fear. And it was one of the most exhilarating experiences I've ever had. And so every time we're able to move past a fear, we're sort of inoculating our consciousness to say, I can manage fear. And then we can build ourselves up to maybe some of the ones that really do plague us a little bit here, that are harder for us to get past, and use some of the same principles we used to conquer those.
That's great. You know, one of the things I have, as I've become more sensitive to my own inner conversation, one of the things I've become aware of is that underneath fear, for me anyway, there's always a sense of guidance.
I
And
think so.
and sometimes if I'm not willing to really slow down and listen to that deeper conversation, the fear wins, but underneath that fear is always truth. There's always spirit. There's always, and I need to be able to discern, you know, how much of this is fear, but what's the real conversation that's going on with my deeper self. And how do you do that? How do you learn the difference in your own life between what you're being guided to do, maybe spiritually, and what you're just afraid to do?
I feel like when I hear that inner voice that is guiding me, the feeling, it can be hard to tell the difference between excitement and fear sometimes. And I think I've been able to distinguish a sense of possibility and excitement that has the same kind of like awakening in my gut, but it also has a very distinguished, clear sense of it's I want to say clear sense of clarity. Like I've listened to it. My friend Karen Russo used this word and I love it. I'm obedient to it. So I'm so obedient to it that if I'm driving home and that voice says to me, turn left here, I will go, okay, I will be obedient. I will turn left and let's see what's down this road. I don't know why, but I will be obedient to it. So I will listen to it. What I've learned about the voice of fear that is born out of my unhealed past is it comes with a level of pain and not quite excitement. The feeling inside me is more dread. I feel my nervous system get activated in a way that's not comfortable. I might even get kind of sweaty. I might get my heart might race a little bit. Whereas that other feeling has a distinction of higher energy, but my heart is still kind of, ooh, this could be interesting. Oh boy. Yeah. And there's curiosity underneath it. And I think that's the guidance that's underneath it.
Yeah,
That's
that's
how I
great.
distinguish it.
That's great. All right,
Yeah.
Jeff, what's your question? Jeff, do you have a
All right.
question?
Yeah, I had to unmute myself. I want to address the forgive the unforgivable in the relationship to fear. I like the fight or flight and the fear element to it. But for me, I tend to be a fight or flight pretty intensely, and I go right at it. So your ocean example was perfect. When I grew up, first thing I feared the ocean, I just ran in it, and
Yeah.
it's fine. I got making sales calls, same thing. You just got to do it, and sometimes you fear doing it and you're just doing it. So that really helps. When it comes to the forgiveness, I guess it comes to the same thing. You just have to do it, because I'm on step 9 of a 12-step program, and I've been on it now for about a month. And I've been doing a lot of it and doing it almost every day in some little things, but still not getting it done. And it's been a very painful experience in a lot of ways, because there's a lot of things that reoccur to it. Not to be
Yeah.
personal, but my identity's been stolen, got stolen again. My dogs have been stolen. My belongings have been taken. So, and I still have to deal with it because you have the police and you have things like that to deal with. So to forget that and forgive that, I do, and then I got to relive it again.
Yeah.
So, and doing it doesn't necessarily help. So in that relationship, can you answer that question of attacking fear, attacking forgiveness, when your mode is attack rather than, let it go?
Yeah, sure. Well, my first thing I would say is that what I experience around some of the big things I've had to forgive around that big violence, betrayal, stuff like that, I don't forget. What I feel is that the more I forgive, the less charge I have of negativity and part of how I do that, and I know it may sound hard to do, especially some of those things sound really, really challenging, Jeff, is to try to find some good that occurred because those things happened. So I try to see, is there any way I was blessed by those things? And one of the things that I've noticed about people and working with people over these years is that when people are unwilling to forgive the wrongs that have been done unto them, it's like they're clinging to those wrongs. And sometimes they have repeat offenses that are in the exact same mode, because hanging on to it is almost like clinging to that sense of victimhood and identifying myself as that victim versus the victor. So it can be about, I've got boundaries and I'm setting better boundaries so this never happens to me again. It can be about forgiving the people who have perpetrated these things and understanding that if they'd known better, they would have done better. It can be about trying to see if there's any way that any of these occurrences have blessed me. Are there people that I've gotten to know, systems I've gotten to experience, or an inner strength that has showed up within me because of these things that I wouldn't have had that not occurred? And not that you want to say, oh, it's all fine, I'm so glad these things happen, but to get to the point of neutrality where one can say, these things happened, I'm letting them go, I'm forgiving the people who did them, and I'm still going to have better boundaries. I'm still going to make sure these things don't happen to me again. Going to take every effort from a place of strength to say, my identity's not getting taken again. My identity got taken too a couple of years ago, so I totally understand that one. It's very inconvenient. And to just allow myself to be at peace with the people who are making these choices somehow. And I think that it doesn't do anything to them. It does everything to us. So I also think it's important not to think that if I'm forgiving them, that I'm saying what they did was okay. I'm saying, what they did didn't work for me, and I'm not going to let it keep me from my good and from my light. I'm not giving them any power. I'm not giving them my energy. I'm not letting them win. I'm choosing to come back into my own space. Does that make
Great.
sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you for that. And because of those related issues that just happened, you did a great job. I connected with you on LinkedIn. So if we get
Yes.
that way, I'm sorry I got to leave early, Richard. I've got something I got to get across town. Maybe I'll see you tonight. Good seeing
Thanks,
everybody.
buddy.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Jeff.
Michelle. Great job. Take care.
Thank you. Great question.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jeff. All right, any other questions? I want to open a space. Sharon, you always have a question. I can't believe you don't have a question.
I know. Well, one of the things that I tend to do is I forgive those people, then I go back and drag it back again later.
Yeah.
It's like having a stack of stuff. I keep leaving it. Okay, I've forgiven it, and then something will come. I go, no, that's terrible.
Well, and I can say in my experience, that's happened too. So I think you're
Yeah.
what we would call normal, because I think especially with things that we've felt deep hurt or deep betrayal or deep judgment. We might have to go at it layer by layer. It's almost like an onion peel, and I still have occasional issues that get triggered about my father and those issues from my childhood. But what I believe is most important is that we do live as a person who's willing to see that. And when it comes up, saying to ourselves, okay, I'm normal. This is just another opportunity for me to deepen my forgiveness.
Yeah.
And the more I do it and the deeper I go, the freer I am. And that's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Great.
I have a thing that's kind of ongoing that I've been trying to forgive this woman, and it's still not done, but she sued me and
Wow.
predicated on a lie, and so huge betrayal, everything. Anyway, I really, when I finally got to a place of forgiveness, even though this was happening, and now it's cropped its head up again in the last week, was a sense of awareness that I'm so much better than I used to be.
Yeah, that's great. Good for you.
So, I didn't go off the rails. It was like, okay, here we go. I'm
Yeah.
gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And go back to the idea, Richard, of a few weeks ago about, what if this is the best thing that happened to you?
Mhm.
Absolutely, right?
Not quite
Yeah.
there yet, but
Yeah.
we'll see what
That's
comes
all
out
right.
of it, right?
Or how has this experience blessed me, like we were talking with Jeff a minute ago, like what has grown in me? And it's so beautiful that you're expressing that you've seen your own growth, even though it's, back again. You
Right.
can tell the difference between the Kathleen that first encountered this and the Kathleen that's here now. And that's worth its weight in gold for sure.
Yeah,
I bet.
yeah.
Yeah. A strength.
Okay, so I have another question. So talk to us about how do you deepen your connection with the divine? What does that process look like for you? Is there a meditation process that you use? How do you deepen your connection with the divine?
Well, since I believe that our concept of the divine is that it exists in everything, I think there's lots of ways, and it's about that attention to saying, as I go through my life, everything and everyone that I'm encountering is some expression of the divine, and doing my best to take my outer world, the universe that I'm in, and witness the awe. I'm looking out right now and there's a lake outside my window and the trees are turning green. And so noticing nature and being thankful to the divine for creating this beautiful planet. I'm in the midst of a beautiful event we have tonight, and a bunch of our teams, our staff, they're over there transforming a room into this beautiful experience. And I'm like, God is expressing through these creative people in such a beautiful way. So it's that combination for me of the universe, and I'm talking this week, a new word I've come up with, innerverse. So the meditation, the inner practice, all of it to me is a synchronistic dance that I feel like I can do to continue to always be in deeper and deeper touch with the divine in every way that I can be, and noticing when I feel out of touch, noticing if there's certain places or people or things that I see that I feel out of touch with the divine. I'm teaching the principles of financial freedom right now, which is a great class. And last night we talked about this easy prayer of looking at things, especially things and people that we don't feel represent God as beautifully as we would like, and just doing the prayer, I accept you, I bless you. And we talked in class last night about even like watching the news and watching people and things we don't agree with, and being willing, even in the face of that, to say, I accept this, I bless this. And just using that prayer as a way to even get in touch with the things and people we don't like, don't agree with, to say, I don't have to go be with that person. I don't have to be best friends with that person. I don't even have to know that person, but I can acknowledge that the God presence that's right there. And the more I can do that, the more I can feel that, I feel like the more in touch I am with the divine in every realm of my living.
That's so beautiful.
Mhm.
All right, anybody else have a question? Reverend Doctor, is there anything you'd like to say to us in closing? about what way we can support you, or anything we need to know about your work in the world?
I would say that it gives me great joy to know that there are communities like yours, communities all over the world like this. It gives me great joy and hope for the world. And I know that the transformation that is being called for on this planet is more and more of us having these kind of conversations, coming together in community, lifting each other up, seeing the God presence in each other, and witnessing the beautiful lives that we're living and watching them unfold and holding each other's hands as we walk through challenges. So I'm so grateful that you exist and that you're doing this. And I am so happy for all of you that you've got this wonderful man, Richard Rogers, to support you in the journey, because he's beautiful and amazing. And I just love and adore him.
Well, Reverend Michelle, thank you for being with us. Kate, do you have a question?
I did. It's about, forgiving the people. What I seem to have more problem with is, as I'm ready to move on to a great adventure and move through trauma and whatever I'm doing, it still seems like there are a lot of people that come to me with their fears, and you can see that it's their fear, and they're not willing to own it, but that you can feel it. And so what's a technique that you would have, or just a thought process that you would have for just acknowledging that they're there and thank you for sharing, but not being rude about it?
Yeah, well, and not taking on their fear too,
Right.
like letting them give you the fear flu. So I talk in the book about not taking on their fear and not giving other people your fear flu by talking all the time about what you're afraid. So the best practices that I'm aware of for that have to do with compassion and just saying, wow, I can hear you're really afraid. Is there any way I can support you in this? What would it take for you to be a little more courageous? Are you ready to be more courageous? Is this a fear you're ready to conquer? Are you, we all have a shelf life when we're ready to move beyond it. And you can't talk people out of their fears unless they're asking you to help them with it. And so it's just acknowledging and being seen when we're feeling afraid, I think really helps people. It can help them feel less afraid, not feel as though they're abnormal because they're afraid. And so understanding, as we were saying, that everybody has fears, and just people that. And if you ever get to a point where you want to move past it, I'm here for you. And until then, I'm just going to stand here and hold your hand.
That's great. Reverend, thank you. We love you. We bless you. We truly appreciate you. And I'm honored that you were part of our call today. Thank you for your spiritual leadership in the world. We feel very blessed. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. All right. So next week, we're doing an open coaching call. If you have a question, you can email me ahead of time, or we can work on it next week. And then the week after, on I think it is the 24th, we have Howard Caesar. I love Howard Caesar.
Wow.
Howard Caesar is going to be here on the 24th. And then on the 31st, we have Shad Groverland, who is the CEO of Unity Worldwide Ministries. So I'm really excited about all the calls that we have this month, and I think you're going to love them. Again, Reverend Dr. Michelle, thank you. God bless you. And you guys have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.